Hello everyone and welcome to another video, and this is a very important video. It is a ridiculously exciting video. I have been at ridiculous levels of excitement for the last handful of days because this is my Canadian Rockies planning video. Before we get into the plans themselves, if you want to know more about my adventures across reading, watching, playing and travelling, then do not hesitate to like this video and subscribe. You could also post a comment because comments are the lifeblood of the channel. Okay, let's do the structure of the holiday first, as I think it will be helpful later in the video. We're going for 9 nights. We're doing 3 nights in Banff, then we're travelling along the Icefield Parkway to Jasper, doing 3 nights in Jasper, and then travelling along the Icefield Parkway back to spend another 3 nights in Banff. The holiday could have been more complicated with multiple stops in multiple places involving a lot more hotels, but the availability of hotels was going fast. The complexity of booking the holiday relatively late for a Canadian Rockies holiday meant that if I waited around too long for the perfect structure, chances are we'd have got nothing and ended up going in 2019. So we're happy with the 3-3-3 structure, and that's how we're playing it. And make no mistake, the 2 journeys up and down the Icefield Parkway Road aren't just a boring 4-hour road trip. Epic scenery, multiple stops, multiple adventures along the way in both directions, and strangely enough I'm looking forward to that bit more than the bits where we're in a hotel. If there is a disadvantage of that 3-3-3 structure, it is that both of our times in Banff hit the weekend, which is going to be challenging, but we just really couldn't avoid it, and it's one of the negatives that we're going to have to burn on through. In terms of the overall aims of those 9 days, well, it can be broadly described as seeing the scenery and doing the hikes. Now, when I say doing the hikes, we're under some limits. One of those limits is we're avoiding the very difficult hikes and keeping ourselves to moderate hikes at the worst. The second restriction is some of the hikes we would have liked to do need a party of 4. And while we may find people to team up with at the trailheads, we can't guarantee that. So we've organised our times around avoiding the hikes that need a party of 4 or more. We've tried to structure those sites and hikes around the key things everyone does, and also filter in some of those that less people do so we can feel a bit off the beaten track. Now obviously we're not going to be as off the beaten track as some of those epic hikes you can do, especially the multi-day ones, but we're trying our best. Okay, the journey to Canada. The journey to Canada itself is a bit epic. It is going to involve trains, planes and automobiles. First part of the journey will be a taxi or a lift from a relative to Hartlepool station because we're leaving from the local station. We will get the Grand Central train to King's Cross in London. Once we're in London, we may spend a little bit of time in London and eat there because we would have left from Hartlepool at about midday and will arrive in London going on around tea time. But ultimately we need to be in St Pancras station so we can get another train to Gatwick Airport, where we were staying in the Premier Inn at the North Terminal overnight. The following morning we get up early for a 10:15 flight to Calgary with WestJet. That was a very important flight because it was key for me not to have multiple hops either there or back. It was also key to me to actually finally end up in Calgary because that's the closest airport, and since we'd sort of dropped the whole complex structure of multiple stops, Rocky Mountaineer trains, times in other cities and all sorts of complexities which was making things very difficult, it just made sense to fly in and out of Calgary. I've not flown on WestJet before, but I'm not seeing any signs they're a problematic airline, or at least, you know, not as problematic as all of the wrinkles you get, so I've got my fingers crossed for that. When we land in Calgary, I have to do something which I've never done before. That is drive in a foreign country. I've never done that. For some reason, I always shy away for doing it in the US, and for reasons I can't fully fathom, I don't feel as nervous about it in Canada, even though the same rules apply, driving on the wrong side, all that sort of stuff. But I'm quite looking forward to it, and I think it's necessarily to get the full adventure feel of the holiday. Once we've picked up the hire car, we begin our first road trip and numerous challenges. The first challenge is getting out of Calgary Airport. probably going to be the most difficult bit. Second challenge is working our way around the outside of Calgary. Seems to be mostly bypasses, so it might not be too bad, onto the Trans-Canada Highway. Once we're on the Trans-Canada Highway, it is a single road all the way to Banff and the wonder of the Rockies. I just can't wait to soak up the sights as we approach Banff. It's just going to be epic. We may not actually do that trip without stopping. We may stop at Canmore. The Trans-Canada Highway flies through Canmore, or Canmore's maybe just to the left of the road, can't remember. But there is also some supermarkets there quite near the roadside, so we can stop off, get some supplies for the next 9 days, and then continue on to Banff. Once we get to Banff, we begin our first 3 days of our adventures, and we will be staying in the Irwin Mountain Lodge. In terms of that first day in Banff, not going to rush off and do any hikes. We're going to get the lay of the land, have a walk around Banff, get familiar with our hotel, and I think just cool down, relax, then finally try and get some sleep for the first full day of adventure the following day. Irwin's Mountain Lodge is very similar to a lot of hotels in Banff in that they're pretty much privately owned. They aren't parts of large chains. The Irwin's Mountain Lodge is actually part of, I think, about 3 hotels which are owned by the same individuals or company. But as I said, privately owned, don't really appear on the big holiday sites and stuff like that. And it's a feature of the region. This brings us to the first full day in Banff. Now what you have to consider about these plans is they don't survive contact with the enemy, or in the case of Canada, they don't survive contact with the crowds, or they don't survive contact with the weather. So everything I relate here is the day we plan to do stuff, but we're prepared to be quite dynamic and shift things around. So the goal on day 1 in Banff is to do the Banff Gondola. Go to the top of Sulphur Mountain, walk along the walkway, see the sights from above, and really soak up the scenery from on top of the mountain. On the afternoon of day 1, the plan is to do a hike. Now this is one of those hikes we picked because it's not one of the more popular ones. You know, it's not a hike around Morain Lake, it's not Lake Louise or anything like that. It gets good ratings on TripAdvisor. The only complaints people sometimes raise is 90% of the walking is enshrouded by forest, but me and Jack are perfectly fine with that. The key reason we're doing it is it leads to Boom Lake. And Boom Lake looks very picturesque, it looks absolutely gorgeous, and it is more remote, less people will be there, and we're hoping to get a sense of being up there at a lake that, okay, not many people visit, and get a sense of the remoteness, and we're really looking forward to that. The evening has nothing planned. That's going to be the case for every day because we think the evenings are going to be relax, chill out, recover from our adventures, and I pretty much won't mention them moving forward. Obviously it's going to involve some eating, I would imagine. Not sure where we're going to eat yet, we're going to try and play that by ear. The second full day in Banff, which is our 3rd day there, is the big one. It involves going to Morain Lake and Lake Louise. It almost certainly involves getting up ridiculously early so we can be at Morain Lake before the sun rises, otherwise it will be absolute chaos. We will hopefully capture the sunrise, soak in Morain Lake. We may well do the hike around the lake depending on how our schedules are sorting themselves out. We would have liked to do more hikes from Morain Lake, but the trouble is that it's a grizzly bear zone, so therefore you need a minimum of 4 people pretty much on all the walks. If it happens that we find people to join up with and we go, yeah, let's do it, we may break with the schedule and do a Morain Lake hike. But if that doesn't happen, the plan is to go back to Lake Louise, hopefully find parking. You'll notice that parking is probably going to be one of our main dramas across the whole trip, and then do the hike up to Lake Agnes Tea House. We're fully expecting to spend most of the morning and well into the afternoon in these 2 areas soaking everything up, and other than those targeted items, the rest we're remaining flexible with. On day 4, we get in the car and we drive along the Icefield Parkway. You have no idea how much I'm looking forward to this. When I started planning the Canadian Rockies trip, I had no idea that actually driving along the road would be the main feature of the trip. But it is. I'm really looking forward to it. We're doing it twice. We're stopping at different places in either direction. And this is the journey to Jasper. The first choice we've made is to take the Bow Valley Parkway to Lake Louise. Since we'll have journeyed from Banff to Lake Louise the traditional way once already, we're going to take the Bow Valley Parkway because it affords us two things: a higher chance of seeing wildlife and a stop off at Johnson Canyon, which is stop number 1 on our journey to Jasper. Once we are done with Johnson Canyon, the main features of our Icefield Parkway trip as we go to Jasper is lakes. So stop off number 1 on the Icefield Parkway once we've joined it is Herbert Lake. Once we've had a good look around Herbert Lake, we will jump back into our hire car and drive further along the parkway until we reach Bow Lake. And then we'll stop there and have a look round there. Take in the sights, take in the blue water, just enjoy the tranquility of it. If we can get parked. This is going to be the challenge of this plan. Everywhere says parking is minimal. Parking, there isn't a lot of it. So there's every chance we will get to our stops on the Icefield Parkway and not be able to stop. In order to mitigate that strategy, what we will probably do is mix up the stops we have going to Jasper and the stops we have coming back from Jasper. And if we can't do some of them, we'll mix them up in both directions and hopefully get all of them done somehow. But the plan is Bow Lake. Once we've had enough of Bow Lake, maybe had something to eat, ate our picnic, we will jump back in the hire car and traverse further down the Icefield Parkway, taking in more of the mountains, more of the scenery, until we get to Petyo Lake and Bow Summit. We will walk up to the Bow Summit lookout point and see the gloriousness of Petyo Lake from a height. After that grand vista, we'll go back, jump back in the car and make our way to Jasper. But as I said, depending on parking, depending on weather, we may mix up different stops and factor in some of the ones we plan to make on the journey back. Trying to be flexible. Once we hit Jasper, we will drive on up to Bear Hill Lodge. I'm really looking forward to this. Bear Hill Lodge is a sequence of cabins and we're staying in the cabins on site. It's going to be quite small, it's going to be quite cosy, but it's interesting, it's a different type of accommodation and it should hopefully be fun. Day 5 is our first full day in Jasper and on the morning we're hitting the glacier. We're going to go on the glacier tour in the massive ice trucks with wheels taller than me, and then we're going to go on the glacier walkway, which basically allows you to walk stood on glass overlooking the glacier from a great height. Very tourist thing to do, but it was one of the things on the list we really wanted to see, so we've got it pitched in for day 5 on the morning. Day 5 in the afternoon, I haven't actually got anything listed there yet. I need to find something to do there. I'm still looking at hikes from Jasper to see what I can fit in, and I'll slot something in closer to the time. Day 6. This is where we do the Morain Lake, Lake Louise equivalent of Jasper, in the sense that we go to Maligne Lake. Maligne Lake is a number of things. First, it's a journey which is quite picturesque. Second, we can stop off at Medicine Lake along the way and see that. We can also factor in Maligne Canyon, and when we get to Maligne Lake, which I'm probably totally pronouncing wrong, we plan to do a canoe on that lake. If we do a canoe on any lake, it may be Maligne Lake we do the canoeing on. You never know, we may do Lake Louise as well, or do that instead. Probably a whole weather thing going on with that, but we plan to do a canoe on at least one lake, and it's Maligne Lake at the moment. There are a number of hikes from Maligne Lake. We intend to do 2 of them maybe, the Mary Schaefer Loop and the Moose Lake Loop. The Moose Lake Loop sounds promising, in that they say there's a high chance of seeing moose, which would be really exciting. Day 7, we hit the road again and we're heading on the Icefield Parkway back to Banff. Now there is features of the stops along the parkway in this direction, and that is waterfalls. We intend to hit the Athabasca Falls, probably pronouncing that wrong as well. Sunwapta Falls. Then, once we are waterfalled out, either because we've seen them all or jumped some of them, we will hit Parker Ridge. Now Parker Ridge is a hike a bit like our Boom Lake hike, in that it's 2 we've picked out as our sort of unique experiences. Now, Parker Ridge is a popular hike. It's not like Boom Lake and is a bit of a secondary, less popular hike, but it is the hike that offers maximum return on investment in terms of standing on a ridge and overlooking epic mountains and valleys. Because of course, if you're gonna go to the Canadian Rockies, you want that picture where you're on some ridiculous mountaintop or ridge, as if you've literally climbed Everest and are looking down upon the mountains. Parker Ridge promises some of that without it being rated difficult or very difficult. So I'm really looking forward to that. The only challenge again is parking. So depending on how the parking has gone by this point in the holiday, we may well junk all the waterfalls and burn early to Parker Ridge to make sure we don't find a full car park. We will got a feel for it at that point. But the views from Parker Ridge are absolutely epic. It is the one hike I think we can realistically do. I mean, Jack can probably do them all, but the one hike I can realistically do without it being rated very difficult and, you know, a bit too challenging to be enjoyable. Once we've done Parker Ridge, we will take our very tired legs, get back in the car and travel further along the parkway until we get back to Banff. When we're back in Banff, we will be staying in the Rundlestone Lodge. Now, as I said earlier in this video, sometimes the same people own small groups of hotels. The Rundlestone Lodge is actually owned by the same people as the Irwin's Mountain Lodge. We then have 2 full days in Banff. Now, the plan at this point gets more vague. It may firm up closer to the time, in which case I'll update you, but at the minute I'm leaving it slightly loose. Now, the reason I'm leaving it slightly loose is I suspect that all the previous days might not go to plan. So we may find that on our second period in Banff, we want to go to Lake Louise again and mop up some things we couldn't do before. Maybe our Morain Lake experience didn't work out how we wanted, so we'll go back there. Or we may do some of the hikes out of Banff. We may also be quite tired by this point because we'll have done a whole lot of walking and driving. So I'm leaving the 2 days quite flexible. I have a feeling I might leave them flexible right up till the point we've got on the plane and see how the holiday's going to fill in those 2 days. And then once those 2 days are over, we get in the car, drive back to Calgary and jump on our flight back to London, only to get the same train back to St Pancras, hop over to King's Cross, and then again the train back to Hartlepool, which in no way will feel as exciting when we came the other way, and then everything is done. I'm really looking forward to this holiday. I think it has a nice mix of stuff. I'm really excited about the Icefield Parkway journey there and back, and I'm really hoping that parking does not totally scupper our plans for those journeys along that road, because I'm really excited about that. I think we have a good mix of high population tourist activities, you know, the trip onto the Icefield, Morain Lake and Lake Louise, which are going to be packed. But we will deal with it. And then also slightly different things like the Boom Lake hike and also Parker Ridge, which I'm really looking forward to, because I think that's going to give me that experience of being on a narrow ridge looking over something epic, which I wanted to at least experience that without feeling like I had to do some sort of ridiculous hike, which would probably be less fun than it should be. So there you go, that is the Canadian Rockies trip laid bare as it stands at the moment. As I've said numerous times, I fully expect these plans to not stay perfectly as they are once our hire car hits the tarmac, the weather kicks in, parking congestion throws us a curveball, or whatever else. If you've been to the Canadian Rockies, I'd be interested to know what you think of these plans or if you have any recommendations. Other than that, please consider liking this video and subscribing. We're in single digits now. There will be vlogs of the Canadian Rockies trip. I am literally shaking up how I vlog for this trip. Hopefully the weather won't disrupt it, and I'm really excited about it. So please subscribe, check out the vlogs when they hit the channel. Until next time.